There's 104 days of summer vacation and a bunch of shit animes out there. Which one should I eliminate so these anime-loving Kakashi simping weebs don't waste their time watching shit animes? Naruto filler episodes? Okay. Season 2 of Promised Neverland? It had to be done! What else should I add to my Deathnote? Creator of Hunter x Hunter. What did I just do? Okay, he's only sick. Okay, that was a close one.
If you're like me, you're always on the lookout for the next good anime. But because everyone has such different tastes, sometimes it's really difficult to know whether or not you should trust the good and the bad reviews online. So you listen to the reviews, you watch 4 or 5 episodes, but you might not like it, so then you waste that time. That's why I'm going to let you guys know in advance where my preferences lie, and that's with shonen and hero-themed animes, as well as really emotional animes. That way, if you have similar tastes to me, listen to my reviews and you don't have to waste your time watching animes that you wouldn't like. In today's video, we're going to be speed reviewing 20-ish or so pretty popular animes. That way you can know whether or not you should watch them. Let's get straight into it. First up, we have One Punch Man, the perfect, funny, nonchalant, OP protagonist show. It proves you don't need an insane plot to be entertaining, just some humor, action, and a mega OP protagonist. I give this 8.5 out of 10. Next up on the list, we have Mob Psycho 100. It's really similar to One Punch Man in a lot of ways. It's funny, it has an OP main protagonist, but the plot is slightly more intense and serious than in One Punch Man, and it makes you think about your life a little bit more than One Punch Man does. So I give this an 8.6 out of 10. Now, next up on the list, we have One Piece. Now, One Piece is a very complex shonen show with excellent character development, good world building, a very good plot. But the thing is, the pacing is just slow as fuck, okay? And a lot of the characters that you want to see more of don't get a lot of screen time. Now, as a whole, if the pacing were better, One Piece would receive a 9 out of 10. But because it isn't, it only gets a 6.9 out of 10. Now, next up we have Naruto, which is a show that'll make you fall in love with almost all the characters. It has amazing music, some of the most perfect and complex world building, and it's really funny. Now, there's a reason that almost everyone will tell you to watch this show. Give it a 9.3 out of 10. Next up we have Demonslayer, which I consider a great starter anime because it has a simple plot, fast pacing, action, very likable characters, and good music. It's relatively short at this point, but it's already really iconic. 8.7 out of 10. Next up we have Deathnote, which is what I call a plot is in the name show, but you'll watch it more for all the plot twists and all the mindfucks that it presents. This is probably one of the best strategy shows out there, so if you like a show with a lot of plot twists and turns, this is probably the show for you. 7.6 out of 10. Now, if your parent made you play an instrument as a kid, this show will bring you a slightly romanticized, but also sadder version of what your childhood could have been. This is probably one of the best love stories I've ever seen in an anime, partly because of the female protagonist. And I never cried, but I cried during this show. 9.4 out of 10. Black Clover. It starts out with an intriguing story with some very likable but predictable, typical shonen type characters with potential to be a top 5 anime. But the thing is, it doesn't quite characterize on this potential as the show goes on. 7.9 out of 10. Now, Food Wars. This show has excellent fan service that makes the show very interesting to watch at first, but it gets slightly less interesting and more predictable as the time goes on. But it's still very satisfying to watch. 7.2 out of 10. Now, 7 Deadly Sins. Even though the animation gets worse over time, the characters are slightly more complex than you'd expect them to be in a show like this. Now, the plot and the action is good, but it's also nothing to write home about. 7 out of 10. Now, My Hero Academia. This show has some of the most elaborate hero/tier systems in anime, with some very likable characters, but a slightly annoying protagonist. It has good music, action, and animation, with a plot that is predictable, but excellently executed, making this a worthwhile watch. 8.6 out of 10. Now, The Promised Neverland. This is another good one if you like strategy animes. It's full of unexpected twists and turns, but let me just tell you that Season 2 is slightly disappointing. So 7.2 out of 10. Now, bunnygirl senpai. Honestly, this is a show with good fan service and good music, but if we're just talking about the plot itself, it can get kind of confusing and a little bit strange at times. But the show is pretty entertaining because of the fan service element of it. 6.8 out of 10. Now, horimiya. To me, this show was a little bit cheesy and a little bit more on the bland side, but sometimes this is something that comes with being a slice of life show. I think that with a little bit something extra in the story, it had potential to be good, but it just didn't quite live up to it. 5.8 out of 10. Darling in the Franxx, another very heavy fan service show. And let's be honest, 02 is kind of... Now, the plot itself, without the fan service, it's quite bad, quite unoriginal, but the music is pretty good. Without the fan service, maybe like a 3.5 out of 10, but with it, 6.2 out of 10. Now, Irregular at Magic High School. This show is pretty satisfying for those of you who like OP protagonists, but sometimes it seems like the plot goes a little bit too far with the incestual undertones and with the amount of OP-ness the character has. 6.8 out of 10. Next we have Ping Pong the Animation. It's really short, but it keeps you hooked the entire time. There's really unique animation, and it makes you feel all the emotions that an athlete would actually feel when competing. 8.2 out of 10. Now, this is an anime with a plot that is slightly poorly executed, with characters that feel slightly too young to be in the situation that they're in, and also a love story that takes a little bit too center of a role for my liking. Now, to be fair, the first season starts out as a pretty decent adventure anime, but the writing just gets worse and worse as it goes on. 5.9 out of 10. Now, Saiki K. This show is almost the perfect show for anime Doro. It's really entertaining and funny because of the protagonist, but there's very little plot, no cliffhangers, which means very little commit. 8.1 out of 10. Now, Hunter x Hunter. Watch this for the iconic characters, the music, or the action. The main plot sort of takes a back seat as the story goes on, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing. This is an excellent example of how you can have really good world building without having like 500 bajillion episodes. One Piece. I'd give this 8.6 out of 10. Jujutsu Kaisen. While I'd say that there's nothing out of the ordinary about this show, pretty typical shonen, dumb main character, OP teacher, that type of entire dynamic, the plot and that stuff isn't even that original, but good animation, good action, interesting characters, good music. That's pretty much all you need to have a good anime, and that's what this anime does. 8.3 out of 10. Now, Dr. Stone. You might like this show if you like science. Now, it's one of those types of shows where you know that the main character is going to overcome anything that comes at them. It's more about watching how they do it. It is probably more a strategy show than an action show, but it's slightly funnier and slightly more lighthearted than your typical strategy show. 8 out of 10. Tokyo Ghoul. First of all, there might not be a more iconic song than Unravel, but the main protagonist in this show starts out a little weak seeming and a little weak, a little timid, but gets exponentially stronger as the show goes on. And the pacing of the show picks up a lot, if not a little bit too fast. This is a slightly darker version of your typical hero versus villain show, but a very worthwhile watch. 7.6 out of 10. Anyways, if you disagreed with any of the opinions in this video, you're wrong. I'm just kidding. If you disagreed with any of the opinions in this video, leave a comment down why. And also, if you want to fight me, leave a time and place. I'll be there. Anyways, if you liked the video, as usual, like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.